everyone from? Do we have people from Northern California? Woo! Southern California? How about coastal California, which would include both northern and southern? Central Coast? No. Sacramento? San Jose? No. San Francisco? Who's in the house? Woo! Los Angeles? That's where I'm from. Any LA people here? San Diego? Anyone from San Diego? Okay, so we do have people from all over this great state of ours. So thank you all for coming to the Central Valley. And how many are from the Central Valley? Fresno, I know, is here. Clovis, we're in Clovis. But we also have a lot of other areas. We have Hanford, Tulare, Visalia, Reedley, lots of different communities here. So it is my pleasure to be your MC today. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a lecturer at Fresno State in Asian American Studies, where I also teach critical thinking, which is a very important skill for our young leaders and everyone to have. I'm also the former past president of Central California Asian Pacific Women, CCAPW, and Dr. Yashu Liang is the current president of CCAPW. And we have some other former board members and members of CCAPW as well. And formerly, before I moved to Fresno, I was the director of public policy at a nonprofit called Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, or LEAP. So I've been involved in the Asian American community, I guess it's fair to say, for a pretty long time. So it's my pleasure again to be here. And so just a couple of housekeeping items just to make sure that today runs smoothly. We do have headsets, so if anybody requires interpretation in the languages of Hmong, Vietnamese, or Mandarin Chinese, please see the woman in the back at the back table next to the screen, and she will fit you up with a headset and you will be hooked up to one of our great interpreters. Also, please note that this conference is being live streamed and you can view it on the conference website at apimhec.org under the conference tab. And so if anyone needs any assistance in hooking up to that, please ask one of the conference volunteers walking around in blue shirts with lanyards and their name badges. One more item, if you will look in your conference bag within the program, you will see that there are a number of pink sheets in there, and those are demographic surveys that are provided in a few different languages. And the conference organizers would really like you to fill out these conference demographic sheets because it will help them in future funding and also, most importantly, in getting information about who comes to this conference every year so that they can adequately plan for next year and the year after. Because I understand that this is a growing conference, so it's great to see so many people in this room. Okay, let's see. Oh, and one other thing, if you do fill out your pink survey and turn it in to one of the conference volunteers, your name will be entered into a raffle, and I hear there's a lot of really great prizes. So that's a little incentive for you to fill out those demographic surveys. Okay, so I think we are going to move on to our first honored guests to come here today. The planning committee and the honored and our other guests are proud to start this unique conference with a lion dance. And this is a traditional Chinese culture display by Mua Lan, which is the Chinese student club at Buchanan High School, which is one of our local Clovis Unified School District high schools. So the Mua Lan lion dance will begin shortly. Okay, apparently we have a few minutes. They're getting ready, but they will be here in about 10 minutes, they say. So please commence with your eating and chatting and catching up with people. And I'm sure you will know when they come in because they make quite a lot of noise. Thank you so much for the Mulan Lion Dance Troupe. Weren't they wonderful? Okay, so we're going to have, if anyone would like to come up and take photos, they have kindly agreed to pose for pictures for a couple of minutes before we move on with our program. Oh, and this is our advisor. Oh, what is her name? Huh? Miss Lily Wong is their advisor. Thank you. Do you want to explain the significance of the lion dance? And we're going to have the monk explain the significance of the lion dance. So thank you.
Hello. So, lion dance has been a part of Chinese culture.
Hold it right up to your mouth. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. The purpose of the lion dance is to ward off evil spirits, and the monk helps lead them. And the lions symbolize like a protection, and people do it every new year so that when they come into the year, they're not like blessed with evil and things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, good job. So I'm part Chinese, and I remember every year, whenever the Chinese New Year would come around, there would always be a lion dance, and it's not to be confused with the dragon dance, which is the long one that marches through the streets with a bunch of people with sticks. These are lions, and they are symbolic of good luck and prosperity for the new year. They also have lion dancers perform at weddings and birthday parties of significance. So we commonly see lion dances in Chinese kinds of celebrations. I was always amazed when they would eat, or they would, eat the lettuce and peel the oranges and spit it out. And so I was always fascinated as a little kid watching them. Okay, thank you, lion dancers. And thank you, monks and drummers. All right. Thank you. Okay, it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Thao Nguyen, who is the pastor of the Vietnamese Presbyterian Church in Fresno, to honor us with an invocation. Now that we've cleansed the bad spirits away and are welcoming in the good, we will invite Dr. Nguyen up to do an invocation.
Lời đầu tiên của tôi là xin chào mừng đến quý đại biểu, quý khách mời đã đến tham dự hội nghị nâng cao sức khỏe tâm thần châu Á Thái Bình Dương.
First and foremost, I would like to thank you for the invitation to attend the third annual statewide API Mental Health Empowerment Conference.
Quý vị có khỏe không?
How are you feeling?
Tôi rất vui khi có mặt trong buổi sáng hôm nay cùng với quý vị.
I'm delighted to be here this morning with you all.
Kính thưa quý vị, chỉ còn một tuần nữa thì chúng ta bước vào tới mùa lễ tạ ơn.
We have about one more week until Thanksgiving.
Đây là mùa lễ rất là quan trọng đối với sự tạ ơn Thiên Chúa.
It is a very important event for us to say thank you and be grateful to God.
Bắt đầu từ một nhóm người từ ở châu Âu và họ tìm kiếm tự do của mình đã tìm đến châu Mỹ để cư ngụ.
Started with a group from Asia coming to the U.S. For freedom.
Chỉ có một thời gian sau thì có một số người đã bị chết vì cớ thời tiết khắc nghiệt và bệnh tật.
And then afterwards, a different group that came and died out because of the different diseases of the land.
Thời gian kế tiếp là thổ dân ở đó đã giúp đỡ họ tìm cách biết cách săn bắn và xây dựng lều trại để sinh sống.
And then afterwards, the native of the land, the Native Americans, has helped the people who came to learn how to survive on the land.
Một thời gian sau thì họ đã thu hoạch được thổ sản rất nhiều và gia súc gia cầm. Việc đầu tiên của họ là tạ ơn Thiên Chúa.
After their, I guess, successful adaptation to the land, one of the first things that they did was to have a Thanksgiving dinner or lunch.
Kính thưa quý vị, đối với người Mỹ gốc châu Á của chúng ta cũng vậy, cũng có tình trạng tương tự như thế.
It is very similar to the same journey for us Asian.
Chúng ta cũng từng sống ở trong một đất nước rất là khó khăn.
We also have a history living in a land where there was a lot of hardship.
Bị áp bức, bị tù đày, bị khốn khổ, bị chết chóc, nghèo khó và bệnh tật.
So all of this hardship includes imprisonment, poverty, lack of freedom.
Tạ ơn Thiên Chúa vì từng lúc từng hồi Ngài đã có cách để cho dân tộc của chúng ta bước sang một đất nước tự do như thế này.
And because of that, we are very grateful for the ability, for the opportunity for us to be here in the U.S. for the land of the free.
Rồi chúng ta đã có một cuộc sống sung túc, giàu có, thịnh vượng, con cháu đầy đàn.
And after we arrived here, most of us, or some of us, have had a very successful life.
Đó cũng là sự phấn đấu nỗ lực của mỗi một con người châu Á của chúng ta.
That speaks to the resiliency and the hard work of the Asian community.
Còn trẻ thì phấn đấu trong học tập, khi trưởng thành thì cố gắng tìm kiếm sự nghiệp vững vàng cho mình.
And that attributes of character continue to get passed on to our younger generations.
Và biết bao nhiêu người đã giàu có trên đất nước này.
And because of that cultural practice, that more people are more successful nowadays.
Tuy nhiên, nó cũng là một gánh nặng, một trở lực làm rắm rối cả tâm thần của con người chúng ta.
And because of all those quality that we also have in our Asian community, it also somewhat contribute to the mental health challenges that we face nowadays.
Khi một cuộc sống càng ngày càng chạy theo cái tiến trình tiến hóa của xã hội,
the pressure to always succeed in society
có nhiều người đang mắc chứng trầm cảm,
has led many to experience depression,
nhiều người rối loạn tinh thần,
psychosis,
nhiều gia đình bất an,
family falling apart,
tan vỡ,
and divorce.
Và cũng không ít người đã tìm cách để từ chối cuộc sống của mình bằng cách quyên sinh.
It also led to many youth and people in general have committed suicide.
Một thời gian gần đây nhất là chúng ta nghe tin có nhiều vụ xả súng ở các trường học, ở nơi công cộng và ở các siêu thị.
We have also are well aware of the increase of mass shooting around the country, and also the recent one here in our community.
Bởi vì họ không thể làm chủ được tâm thần của mình.
Because oftentimes when individuals are not able to take care of their mental well-being,
và họ đã muốn người khác phải chết và chính họ cũng phải chết.
Have led people to consider of wanting themselves to die or wanting others to die.
Thời gian gần đây nhất chúng ta nghe được là ở tại một trường học tại LA có một cậu học sinh 16 tuổi cũng đã cầm súng bước vào trường để bắn các bạn học.
And the recent incident in Los Angeles where the 16-year-old has gone into a high school to shoot.
Và cách đây chỉ có vài ngày thôi thì chúng ta nghe tin ở thành phố Fresno, nơi chúng ta đang dự hội nghị này,
And we are also aware of the recent incident here in Fresno County
cũng có một vụ xả súng làm cho 4 người thiệt mạng và 6 người bị thương.
and the loss of those who are impacted.
Sự kiện này đã làm cho cư dân ở thành phố Fresno trở nên khủng hoảng, lo sợ, bất an bởi vì biết chính mình cũng đang sống trên vùng đất không an toàn.
And because incidents like this have led many of us here in this community to feel unsafe.
Nhưng mà tạ ơn Thiên Chúa, một lần nữa cánh tay của Ngài đã giơ lên để bày tỏ lòng thương xót của Ngài đối với cộng đồng của chúng ta.
And we are also grateful for God to bring us here together as one community.
Ngài giấy động lên tấm lòng của những người làm công tác xã hội.
For all of you here who are in the mental health professions,
Ngài cảm động các bác sĩ,
or the psychiatrists, or those mental health providers,
các chuyên gia,
mental
các
health
chuyên
providers,
gia tâm thần và các nhà chuyên môn
all of those involved in the mental health professions,
ngồi lại với nhau để tìm ra những biện pháp thích hợp nhất, tốt nhất để chữa lành vết thương cho cộng đồng, nhất là cộng đồng châu Á của chúng ta.
The opportunity for us here today and for this next 2 days to come together as one community of Asian community, Asian API communities, to be able to explore, discuss, and come up with effective strategies to help our community members address the challenges.
Tôi nghĩ đó cũng là lý do mà có hội nghị của chúng ta ngày hôm nay.
And I believe that is one of the reasons why we have this conference today.
Vì danh của Giê-hô-va là Rapha,
I'm gonna skip that part.
danh của Chúa là Rapha. Giê-hô-va Rapha. Yeah. Giê-hô-va Rapha, ta là Đức Chúa Trời chữa lành bệnh cho các ngươi.
So according to Jehovah, where I'm here to bring healing upon you all.
Vì mọi điều gì ở trong ta thì phải ca tụng danh thánh của Ngài.
Because everything that we have is a blessing from God.
Và Đức Chúa Trời đã nhớ đến nỗi bức xúc, đau buồn, đau thương, bức bách trong tinh thần của mỗi người chúng ta mà Ngài đã làm nên sự này.
And God is well aware of our own conditions and the challenges that we experience.
Nguyện xin quyền năng Thiên Chúa ban phước lành cho tất cả quý đại biểu ngày hôm nay, được đầy ơn của Ngài để bày tỏ tấm lòng yêu thương cộng đồng. Và nguyện xin Thiên Chúa ban phước lành cho các vị chức trách của xã hội, nhất là ở tại quận Fresno này, được đầy ơn và ban cho sự bình an của các vị khách mời, được đầy ơn của Thiên Chúa trong 2 ngày hội nghị này được thành công mỹ mãn.
And I pray in God's name to bless all of you here for success, but also for the opportunity to get together to bring about changes and impact for these next 2 days for the community.
Xin cảm ơn quý vị.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Okay, now please join me in welcoming Dewan Utek, Director of the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health. She has been leading significant changes and addressing the multicultural needs of the community for over 6 years as the director of the department, and many more in the private sector. So, Dewan, please join us today.
Thank you. Before I begin, I did want to invite up Dr. Gia Zhang. And Dr. Zhang is going to lead us in a moment of silence to recognize the lives lost this last week.
Thank you, Dewan. This past Sunday, there was a tragic in our Fresno community and the API, and especially in our Hmong community. We have 4 beautiful lives that we're taking. And so now, if I may ask all of us to stand, if I may, and I ask that all of us give a moment of silence to these 4 wonderful souls and all of those families and those that has been impacted. Thank you. You may sit.
Thank you, Dr. Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang is part of the Fresno Center, one of our trusted and esteemed providers of services through the Department of Behavioral Health in Fresno County. I appreciate that. On behalf of Fresno County and the Department of Behavioral Health, as well as our co-host, Vietcare, I would like to welcome you to the conference. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a native Californian, not a native Fresnan. I was born in Santa Clara County and then moved to Tulare County and then to Fresno County, where I spent the most of my growing up years. And then I went to school in Los Angeles County. Counties, I also lived, by the way, in Craighead County in Arkansas, as well as New York County. Lived in New York City for my graduate school. I come from a very large family. We are all over California and still have people in Lassen County, Kern County, Tulare County, San Luis Obispo County, Fresno, of course, as well as Stanislaus. And I'm sure I've missed someone, but fortunately they're not here to hold me accountable to that. Counties play a unique role in our state, particularly as it relates to behavioral health. So a little bit about Fresno County. We're a little over 6,000 square miles. We have around 1 million people. We have 15 incorporated cities ranging in size from about 4,000 people to over 500,000 people in our metropolitan area of Fresno and Clovis, which we're in right now. I actually went to junior high right across the street over there and graduated from Clovis High. We have over 30 school districts in Fresno County, and 500,000 people or so are Medi-Cal eligible. We have a very rich cultural diversity with threshold languages in English, Spanish, and Hmong. We have about a 12% population who represents Asian Pacific Islanders. And about 16% of the state's population is represented by API, and it is one of our fastest growing racial and ethnic populations. And interestingly enough, in California, we have about 1/3 of the API population in the United States. This conference comes at a very unique time, a critical time for the ever-changing landscape of behavioral health. And today, through this collaborative effort, we are bringing together community leaders, honorable leaders in our community, students and school district representatives, fellow behavioral health care colleagues, and really trying to recognize the need to change the narrative around behavioral health, and particularly with our Asian Pacific Islander population. We know that there's a lot of stigma around talking about behavioral health issues, and for many of our ethnic populations, our diverse populations, there are even more unique challenges with that, as referenced earlier. And so we've got to, what I call, normalize the conversation. We have to elevate the issue, and conferences like this help us to do so, to recognize that until we're talking about it, we're not going to change that narrative. I'm really excited today that you'll get to hear from my colleague, Jay Africa. Jay and I work together frequently. We see each other usually every month at our California Behavioral Health Directors Association. He is a strong voice for the community and for mental health. He is serving on one of our very critical work groups across the state right now to innovate Medi-Cal. And I was saying to him this morning, you are the perfect person, professional, diplomatic, but assertive. And I like that about him. We invite you to participate in all of the key workshop sessions throughout the day. And we have topics like vision for youth, peer support, senior empowerment, outreach to underserved communities, and wellness. We are very proud to be a partner in this change. We have a team here, and I'd ask right now very briefly, everyone who works for the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health, could you please stand? Yay. This is just a small representation, and if you work for one of our contracted entities, could you also stand? One of our contracted providers. Thank you. And this is really just, you guys can sit now. Others will acknowledge the great team we had putting this conference together. But this is just a small representation of people who have dedicated their lives to behavioral health and who are here to support all of our community in improving lives and creating an environment where we can freely talk about behavioral health issues. We have Dr. John Tran here as well. I want to acknowledge him, another really important partner that we have. Dr. Tran is our medical director, and he also serves as the chief of psychiatry for the University of California, San Francisco program here in Fresno. And together, we are going to change the landscape in the Central Valley in terms of growing psychiatrists for our region. And it's really important to us that the people we serve see themselves in the people providing services. And I mean that literally and figuratively. I want us to have a strong workforce that represents culturally and ethnically the people that we serve. People feel safest where they are most comfortable, and so it's important to us that we further that through our workforce development. We honor and recognize your presence today and hope you enjoy this conference, ask questions, and feel lifted up by all that you learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dewan, for your leadership and partnership with the API community locally and on the state level. Okay, now I'd like to bring up Marianne Lee, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Behavioral Health with the County of Fresno. And Marianne will do the honors of introducing many of our local community leaders here today.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to also invite Dr. Gia Zhang to do the first introduction of our very honored guest, and then I will do the rest.
Thank you, Marianne. First of all, I like to acknowledge from our community, also here in Clovis, City Councilman Vong Monatua. If you can also stand up so people know who you are. And nowadays, leaders in our community are not only men, and so I also like to acknowledge many of the women leaders from our community that are here. Dr. Song Lee, who is the chair from the Department of Counseling at CSU Fresno State. Thank you. Then I don't know if Dr. Vicky Zhong Lor, if you're here. Are you here, Dr. Vicky Lor? Okay, she's also a community leader, and she's involved in bringing in a lot of students from Clovis to joining us in this conference. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Now I would like to recognize some of the representatives from our various communities. I will start first off with the Vietnamese community. I would like to invite Mr. and Mrs. Quang Nguyen to stand up for recognition to their contribution to the Vietnamese community. They are one of our elders. Next, I would like to recognize Mr. Quy Ly. Please stand up. He is the president of the Vietnamese Association of Central California, and he's also my husband. We have heard from Dr. Thao Nguyen, who is pastor of the Presbyterian Church. I know at the same... And we will be recognizing those who contribute to this conference at a later point in the day. I also would like to recognize Miss California, Eileen Kim, here with us. Please give her a really big round of applause. Also would like to recognize Miss Teen USA, Miss Clovis, Ali Her. And certainly, last but not least, I would like to recognize the leadership team of our department. Please stand up. We have many managers. And particularly, I would like to recognize my counterpart, Susan Holt, who is the Deputy Director over Clinical Services. Thank you all for making the time to be here with us today. I wish you all a wonderful conference. We have many, many wonderful programs throughout the next 2 days. Tomorrow will be an amazing closing, and I hope that you all return tomorrow morning for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. And it is wonderful to see so many community leaders and everyone who is in this room. So it's my honor now to introduce Dr. Jay Africa, who is our keynote speaker for this morning. Dr. Africa is the Director of Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, or BHRS, at the County of Marin. And he is an innovative thought leader and clinician who is passionate about integrating effective culturally responsive practices into the core functioning of county health services. Dr. Africa has 2 decades of experience in the areas of behavioral health, trauma, health equity, and diversity. So please welcome Dr. Africa.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'll just be honest with you. I just came from Japan, so I'm a bit jet lagged. So I have a few notes just in case I forget a few things and start rambling. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Dewan, for the invitation. I think it's mentors like you that make people like me who are new in this field really successful. So I appreciate not only your ongoing leadership, but your support for newbies like me, and appreciate the committee that brought me here, and I think understands the value of how important visibility is in our community, especially in times where we are often seen as invisible. So let's start with my talk. So I actually titled, when I was invited to talk today, I was thinking very deep and hard about what I wanted to talk about. And so my talk will be about why aren't we at the table anymore? As Asian Pacific Islanders, we have been very successful in this country and many countries that we have been at. But in my opinion, in the decades or maybe years, we're not as present anymore. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you about how coming back to the table is really very important. Are you going to do the slides for me? Right. So, like what Dewan did, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. Next slide. I grew up in the Philippines, which is a small country in Southeast Asia. Depending on whether it's high tide or low tide, we have about 7,107 islands. High tide means lesser, low tide means more. And that talks about the beauty of nature and what you can do with many natural resources. Because of that, we have been inviting to many other countries that have chosen to, I would say, colonize us, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's impactful. We are a population of about 101 million people. We are 81% Roman Catholic, influenced by about 400 years of Spanish influence, i.e. we were colonized by the Spaniards. And about 11% of us are Protestants, influenced by the United States, which in my opinion continues to have their presence in the Philippines. We also have Chinese and Japanese influence. And it's really very important to sort of just think about that over time. This is a picture of me when I was being baptized by the Archbishop when I was younger. It talks about the influence of religion in my life, but it also talks about the impact of family and values that have been, I would say, embedded in me as a person and as a human being, but also talks about the impact, sometimes not so good, about religion in my life, especially teaching me about guilt and shame that unfortunately has, I would say, detrimentally sort of affected me in my own development. Next slide. There are a few things that have influenced my life significantly. I was 2 years old when martial law was declared in the Philippines. And when you have lived in a country where you really have no freedom, at some point, it is important to recognize that freedom is very important. And so in about 1986, with the assassination of Benigno Aquino, the Filipino people came to do what we call a people power revolution. And unlike many other revolutions that had happened before this time, we called it more of a peaceful revolution, where images such as a nun putting a flower in a tank or food being given to soldiers were really more common than people being shot or being hurt. Not that it did not happen, but we were really thinking about people coming together to change the system that was really problematic and hurting people. In addition to the beautiful things about the Philippines, there were not so many beautiful things about it that I grew up seeing. Next slide. And here is a picture of people who has a mental illness in one of the provinces in the Philippines that I took when I came to visit, where he was actually chained, well, actually not chained, but sort of locked up in his small little hut. And if you think about how powerful that image is, it talks about really many levels of problems and challenges. One, that we really have not figured out a way to help people who have a mental health condition in the Philippines. And probably the only way, or probably one of the ways to help them, is to lock them up because we want to keep them safe. Is it inhumane? Probably, but maybe that's the only options peoples and families have. It's a powerful message to me that I look at probably every month to think about that there are many still people like these who are suffering, maybe not chained, maybe not jailed, but maybe are suffering in their own silence that needs to have their freedom and their dignity back. And so it's sort of these issues that really brought me to mental health and behavioral health. So before I go, though, to continue on, let me ask a question. Next slide. How well do you think are Asian Americans doing in the United States? I would say thumbs up if you think they're doing well, thumbs down if they're really not doing well, kind of mediocre, thumbs up, it's a thumbs in the middle. What's your sense? Middle, up. The ones that raise it higher so I can see. How about the ones, see it up, really doing well, up. How about the ones in the middle? How about the ones thumbs down? Right? Well, you already know sort of the question is, I think we're sort of doing all of that, right? We're Asian Americans are sort of all in the different scopes, and I want to talk about that. So let's talk about the areas that we're doing well. Next slide. We are about 20 million Asian Americans in the US, and we are coming from about 20 other, I'm just trying to think about here. And many of us, the 20 million Asian Americans in the US, trace about 20 countries in the East, Southeast Asia, and Indian subcontinent. 20 million of us here. Next slide. There's no single country of origin that dominates the US. We sort of see it, China, Philippines, Indian origin, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, all those Pacific Islanders, for example, too. So it's really very important to honor the diversity of where we're coming from. Next slide. Asians will make about 30% of all US immigrants and will surpass our Hispanic counterparts by the year 2055. Almost twice, right? Almost twice. And in some measures, Asian Americans are the most successful in the US demographic, right? Next slide. 12% of professional workforce are Asian Americans compared to only about 5.6% of the US populations. Many of us are professionals. Many of us. Next slide. Half of the Asians, 25 and over, have a bachelor's degree or more. That is a big number. Next slide. Asian households make about $73,000 compared to a US average of about $54,000. We're making mostly $20,000 more than their US counterparts. And those are really, really good figures, but extreme disparities exist. Right? Extreme disparities exist. Next slide. if you look at, you can probably see the details of it, but it tells you how many Asian Americans are still in poverty. And one of the ones that are sort of highest actually are Hmong population, which is about 71%. And it tells you sort of over the scale of how many Asian Americans really are impacted by poverty. We have many in our community. And just this tells you sort of a graph of what is sort of the average median income of many of our communities within the Asian population. Some of us are doing really well. Filipinos, Indians, and some of us are really doing poorly with our Burmese, Nepalese, Bangladeshi communities. It's not working? Right. Out of the 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States, 1.5 million are from Asia. Next. Asian American white-collar professionals are least likely to be promoted into management roles. So as much as I'm the behavioral health director in a statewide association, for example, with CBHDA, I'm probably one of the sort of small handful of folks. And we think about organizations across the country, how many really sort of are of Asian descent. And Dr. Chan will talk more about this tomorrow, and maybe some of the data for me are really not up to date anymore. But about 17.3% of Asian Americans will experience some form of mental illness during their lifetime. The sad part about that is only 8.6 will seek professional help. We are 3 times less likely to seek treatment. PTSD is more common in South Asian countries. Filipino Americans have higher depression rates than the general US population. Asian Americans have lower rates of substance abuse than other racial groups, but is highest among our Japanese counterparts. Asian American women continue to be overrepresented in domestic violence homicides. I'm going to stand there for a little bit if that's okay. And how powerful that is when I think about the effect of violence in many of our communities. That we continue, Asian American women continue to be overrepresented in intimate partner violence. Next slide. Suicidality among Asian American Pacific Islander LGBTQI is higher than any other racial and ethnic group. As much as we're doing well, we have lots of problems. And I think it's important to acknowledge for the folks that are here who said thumbs up, it's important to acknowledge that yes, we are doing well, but we are actually have a lot more work to do. Smoking still kills many of us. About 70% of a study that we saw of Cambodians and Laotians actually are still smokers. Many of our families have gone through much already. War, poverty, fleeing really politically turmoil countries, fleeing persecution because you're LGBTQ, fleeing other countries because of your religion. My question though is, next slide, why have we taken a back seat? Why have we taken a back seat? So, I wanted to, this is not supposed to be just really about, being depressed. But I want to talk about why it's important to really say it's time to change the narrative of APIs here by saying it's time to come back to the table. Next slide. So I asked the question, well, I think why have we taken a back seat? Well, as in studies, for most Asians, the United States really offer a better life, right? We know that. For many Asians, we look at the opportunity to get ahead, better in the United States, freedom to express political interest, better in the United States, treatment of poor people, better in the United States, conditions for raising children, better in the United States, freedom to practice religion, better in the United States, moral values, better in the United States. But then you start thinking about the strength of family ties starts diluting when you come to this country. And so I think part of thinking about how we need to change the narrative is to come back to our values and to our ties. Next slide. So I want to talk about what can we do, right? Because hopefully, when Paul asked me to speak, he wanted me to say, be a cheerleader, not a damper, right? But I have to really talk about the reality and the painful things before I can say, to convince you that you need to do something, that we need to do something. Our silence and invisibility is harming us. Our silence and invisibility is harming us. We have to do something different. Next slide. We need to make our voices heard. We need to make sure that we are counted and our data about us is disaggregated. We have sort of the census that's coming up. We have to figure out a way to convince people to fill out those census forms. The 2028 elections is coming up. We have to vote. I don't care if you are voting whatever way, but you have to be counted. And even if you think it will not matter because it's one vote, believe me, it will. So, if many of you have not registered, this is the time to do that and convince your family members that their voice is as equally as important as everybody else in this country. Next slide. Race discussions have excluded us, even if it continues to significantly affect us. It is really sad for me to be in conversations about race when it's all about our black and brown brothers and sisters, even our white brothers and sisters. And when I talk about, well, what about Asian Americans? They're like, well, you're doing well. And oftentimes when I'm in those conversations, we are silent. And so it is key that when we talk about race in this country, we talk about the power of Asian Americans as a racial and ethnic group. That when people talk about racism in this country, we raise our hands and say, what about our community and how it's impacted us? And to no longer be silent, because this is not about brown and black and white. This is about us too. Next slide. In a study that actually AAPI data looked at, they asked the question, have you ever personally experienced discrimination or have been treated unfairly because of your race or ethnicity? Compared to our other colleagues, we are pretty much neck and neck with our black brothers and sisters of feeling really affected by discrimination. How can we not talk about race in this country? How can we not talk about how AAPIs are affected by race in this country? Next slide. In a study done by Harvard Business Review, they looked at the impact of ethnicity with the ability to actually be promoted. Although 27% of its Asian of its U.S. professional workforce identify as Asian, only 11% of us are executive and senior managers in Goldman Sachs. None were executive officers, meaning sort of the highest levels in that workforce. Next slide. 10% of the 30 top law schools are Asian, yet we have the highest attrition rates and lowest rates of partners to associates in terms of lawyers in this country. So then we ask, well, how important are these sort of issues among our brothers and sisters in the API community? The orange graph, or orange parts, talks about that it's extremely important. The middle ground talks about how very important it is. But I'm actually worried about the ones on the blue end, because some of us think that race and ethnicity and these conversations are not important for us. Although I look at this slide and say, well, a lot of us think it's important. What about that blue side? And if you don't think it's important, I offer you to think differently, because it is. Next slide. I ask you, third important one, is to get involved in political advocacy. The value of collectivism, which we are very known, is really a great asset here. Right? That we are not just focused on the individual self, but really more collectively. But then to extend it beyond just our family, but extend it to our community within the API community as well. Collectivism is an advantage for us. Next slide. Now here's another question that AAPI data looked at. They asked the question, Do you think Asian Americans or your community is represented well in Congress? The orange part of this graph says, many people says, I think it's important. But look at that blue part. Many of them said, it's not important that we have Asian American representation in Congress. Again, if you want your voices to be counted, you need people to be at the table talking about bringing the issues that really are relevant to our community. And then we asked the question on women. How many you think among sort of our sort of communities think that having women is important in Congress? And how important for me to really distinguish that although we think we need Asian representation, we don't quite think the same way for our women counterparts. Now, in many countries that value patriarchy, this is a problematic issue. That we really need to talk about equal rights for all people. And so it's really very important to think about sort of the impact, the message, and the rights that sort of we're fighting for. Next slide. Fourth thing, I think we need to redefine the concept of this model minority myth. What's the model minority myth for folks that would like to share? What's the model minority myth? So that Asian Americans are much more successful than other minority groups. What else? Oh, hi, Miss California. So we assume to have the same sort of degree of success with everybody else. Is that correct? Without having the privileges like that other people have, right? Others? That Asian students are doing very well in school. That's true. I think that the backstory there of sort of what they have to go through to really keep up sort of the demands of academic pressures. Now, I will tell you, when I was preparing for this presentation, I was looking at pictures that depicted sort of the opposite of the model minority, and I didn't see a lot. And this is the picture that sort of stood out, and I wanted to share that. Right. So I don't know if you see it, but this is sort of this young woman, I believe, sort of reading or studying and sort of with other people, kind of head down, kind of sad. And then I was really searching for images to talk about, like I want to really talk about debunking the model minority myth. I really had a hard time. And the only thing that sort of popped out was really about academic issues. And then I was actually very uncomfortable with that, because I wanted to, two things. I wanted to really say, well, I want to show people that we're different, we're successful. But I also wanted to tell you the truth that many of us are suffering because of sort of what is happening in this country, but also what has happened in many of our countries because trauma is so big. So I wanted to sort of keep that in your mind, and that sort of image that, we don't have to stand up to this model minority myth, and that we need to really redefine what that means. Next slide. And because I'm a therapist and mental health is an important issue, I looked at how many of us providers are there in the United States, and only 4% of active US psychologists identify as Asian. Now, we don't think that's a problem, then I don't know what. And so for the young people here, I think there's a few tables. I'm hoping that one of the things that you would consider in your profession is to come be in the field of health and behavioral health, because we need people like you. And although your parents and grandparents will say you have to be a lawyer or, or a programmer, maybe some, I would consider that there is no bigger, more satisfying job than to be able to have the privilege to sit with people and hear their life stories and be a tool in their wellness and recovery. That it is actually a privilege for many of us here in the room to be part of people's journeys, to heal and grow, and be the people that we were intended to be, whatever universe or belief that you have. So it is an invitation to our young people to say that there is another profession, and we hope that you would join us at some point. Next slide. Thank you. The other thing I want to talk about is to reframe shame. You know, and many, as you heard, that I have sort of been doing behavioral health work for close to 2 decades. And I've seen the concept of shame really used negatively in many of our communities. You know, and I struggled with that because I feel like that's a value that I had grown up, although not always very positive, have helped me in some ways strive to do better. My dad, who has a very strong work ethic, always says, you're probably gonna either laugh or be sad about it, but he would say, you know, don't shame me. And, you know, when I was growing up, that was really hard to hear as a young person. But then I realized over time I needed to reframe what that meant. And for me, what it meant is don't waste your life and make something out of it in a way that is authentic to who you are. To reframe that the use of shame and guilt to change other people's lives. But while also growing up, unfortunately, I had many of those negative messages. And I'll be honest with you, and we are in a community here, of how sometimes shame can really be detrimental. Actually, a lot of times be detrimental. Growing up as part of the LGBTQ community, I also heard my dad say, don't shame me because being gay or being LGBTQ or being part of that community, that doesn't happen in our community. And that was hard. And coming out as a transgender man was even harder. And I say that because I have still many barriers to face every day. As a behavioral health director, as a transgender individual, as part of the Asian American community, in my own family, in my own community, I'm trying to walk the talk by saying, I no longer want to be invisible. And as much as probably you're raising your eyebrows and people who are sort of hearing it and saying, I don't understand what he's saying right now, the issue here is authenticity. The issue here is fighting for what we believe is right, not only for ourselves, but for our community. To reframe the shame of hearing all my life that I am not good, that I am abnormal, that I am less relevant because I don't conform, is really detrimental, not just to me, but to people around me because I made their lives miserable. To reframe the shame and saying, I am not going to be ashamed. I am not going to be ashamed of my culture. I'm not going to be ashamed of who I am. Next slide. And then, because I am a therapist, I have to say this. As a practicing psychologist for a long time, I want to say we need to take ownership of the treatment process. And we are in a behavioral health conference, so we have to talk about how we need to be involved in the treatment process. As consumers, to speak up when things are not right, to be involved in the continuum of care, to say, doctor, I'm not really agreeing what you're saying, and here's the direction that I want to go. To be as caregivers, to say, as family members and people who care about the people that we're working with, that we have a say too as family members. That shutting us out of the treatment process really is harmful, and that our involvement as caregivers are important in this treatment process. As providers, we need to also take ownership of the treatment process, that we don't know everything. That even if I am Asian American, and even if I'm trans, I don't represent all Asian Americans, and I don't represent all transgender individuals in this country. That my uniqueness and authenticity and individuality makes me great. As caregivers, our humility to say, I don't know what that means, and I need to learn more about that, and help me understand, are phrases that we should say every day. And as decision makers, that we have the responsibility to understand the community's needs. That we have a lot more work to do to go to the community, and we have to change the notion that community needs to come to us. That we have a lot of work to do to go to those communities, to go to those homes, to talk to people. And that sometimes the four walls really are barriers to really helping us understand what needs to be done. Take ownership of the process. Speak up. Be involved. Next slide. Sort of in my 8 minutes left, I think, I want to sort of leave you two pictures. And if people who can see it, the people that can see the picture, who's on the picture, if you can see it? Who else is in the picture? Anybody else who knows who's in the other picture? So for most of the things that I heard is Cesar Chavez, and which saddens me actually in one degree. The Cesar Chavez really was very famous for sort of this the Delano grape strike in the 60s, and so really led the forming of the United Farm Workers Union, actually not far from here, in the Central Valley. But the man right next to him is a Filipino farm organizer called Larry Itliong. Filipino organizer who came to the United States when he was 15 and actually started organizing shortly after he arrived in the United States. Before Cesar Chavez and the Mexican community actually joined the strike, Larry Itliong and a group of about 100 Filipinos voted on September 7, 1965, to have a strike. It was Larry Itliong, Philip Vera Cruz, and two other people that was leading the Delano grape strike. But Larry knew that the small group of Filipinos need counterparts and need allies. So he, together with the three other people, approached Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and said, come join us and let's strike together, because this unfair wages is killing many of our communities. Many people will probably dispute this, but the story said, Cesar Chavez says, I don't think my people are ready. But Larry Itliong says, if we join our forces together, we will be much stronger. And in the merging and the decision to do that, formed the merger of the National Farm Workers Association, which Cesar led, and the organization that Larry and Philip Vera Cruz and other people led, called Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, formed to be UFW, United Farm Workers Union. But it is so sad to me that when we show pictures of the labor strike that happened in the 60s, Cesar Chavez's names comes up, but not Larry's. Cesar Chavez might have been the face of this strike, but Lariat Leong and Philip Vera Cruz were the heart and soul that started that revolution. But the invisibility of my community, the one that really saddens me, that as much as I respect the work of our Mexican and brothers and sisters, it was important for me to acknowledge that this man devoted his life so that all of us might benefit. All of us. And so I talk about invisibility with this picture, because if we are not for all people, then we're not for any people. And so we as Asian Pacific Islanders, Asian Americans, need to be visible, need to also hold our hands together and raise also others up. Because there is no, I would say, we can do more things together when we hold each other up. Lariat Leong taught me one lesson, next slide, is to demand what is due to us. Demand what is due to us. And you can say it's equal rights, it's justice. I'd say it's visibility. I say it's a seat at the table. I'd say it's time to come back to the table and say, what about me? What about us? I end by a picture that I have actually in my back pocket, not back pocket all the time. This is a picture of me when I was young. Oh, not what? That was a picture in the Philippines, and when growing up, and I don't know if I said that, I grew up in the Philippines, came here in my 20s. Unfortunately, when I came to this country, I didn't have much to bring. I have some photos. And this is one of the photos that I have that reminds me really of how I really had a wonderful childhood until at some parts of my life, my dad was saying, you look like a boy. Your sex assigned at birth is female. Like, why are you doing something different? And over time, sort of lost that innocence and I would say fervor. But in my time here of being in the United States for a little bit over 20 years, I've regained what it is like and what it feels like to be a Filipino American. I have absorbed the learnings of my ancestors. I have absorbed the learnings of leaders like Dewan in my life, and I have learned 4 lessons. 1, that I will have grace when faced with difficulties and challenges. 2, that no matter what, I will have the courage to do the right thing. Number 3, that I will fight and have the grit to persevere no matter what. Because eventually, I will hope that things will get better. Grace when faced with difficulties and challenges, courage to do the right thing, grit to persevere no matter what, and hope that things can get better are the values of Asian Americans in this country around the world. Next slide. So what are we waiting for? It's time to go back to the table. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Africa, for your courage, your honesty, and for filling us with all of these facts and knowledge and inspiration. Thank you so much. It's very clear that you have a lot of insight and knowledge about the culture of different Asian Pacific Islanders and how we can all work together to help. And let me give a plug for Asian American Studies. Had any of you taken Asian American Studies at Fresno State, you probably would know that that was Larry Itleong and Philip Vera Cruz. And so for students who are not yet in college or maybe who have the opportunity, I really encourage you to take Asian American Studies classes so that you will learn about our communities. You'll learn about all the different contributions that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made to this country. So, my plug. Okay. As a little reminder, I wanted to make sure that you all remember to fill out the pink conference demographic forms in your program. Again, it is very important for our conference organizers to know who's in the room and what what places you come from, what is your languages, so that they can tailor future programs to your needs. So please fill those out before we move on to the next workshop series, and there are volunteers in the back of the room who will collect them from you. So we do have a few minutes, and so that'll be perfect for you to fill out these surveys. The next workshop session will be, there's a series of 3 workshops that you will choose from that will begin at 10:30, and they will continue until 11:45. Students and teachers, you will note that the Youth Vision and Mental Health Workshop that is going to be in this next session from 10:30 to 11:45 will be located in the front area of this ballroom, so you don't need to move anywhere. But the other workshop sessions for the rest of our attendees will be in the adjacent conference rooms located outside of this main ballroom. If you think there's one on this side and there's a few on the other side. So there are signs and volunteers outside who will guide your way. And then, looking ahead, after these workshops, there will be lunch and some more entertainment back here in this ballroom from 12 o'clock noon to 1:30 p.m. And then after that, there, I believe, is another session of workshops. So thank you very much for all of our wonderful speakers this morning. Dr. Africa, thank you. Dewan Ultek, thank you. And everyone else who came this morning. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you back here at lunch. Thank you.
Oni mong chi pay de shi kay chai mong shi ta wa ke jo kay chai mu ka chiong yi moi nu ku sa mu ka o I tu hung go de shi ku mo te ming dong hing li ho ku lu ning
tôi thích cái mình cả nọ có tàu với mình dùng sư sa cả coi từ tấm lụa coi từ có mỏ dễ ở xí phư ở coi nên dùng
nó cũng nên cứ ô tô li của sa
rồi lý có sa qua có thể cần được cái cô cũng có chúng ta không đã chỉ